Did you ever wonder how the Phoenicians, a people from a small sliver of land in what's today mostly Lebanon, were able to create one of the largest and most successful commercial empires in all of antiquity? If so, then you're in luck, because that's what we'll be exploring in this program. It's been a while since we talked about the Phoenicians, so here's a quick recap for those of you who may have forgotten or who may not be familiar with the subject at all. The Phoenicians were a Canaanite-speaking people who occupied the coastal areas of what's today mostly Lebanon. The ancient Greeks called this land Phoenicia. The land of Phoenicia was made up of several independent city-states that often worked together in order to achieve common goals. Of these city-states, Tyre, Sidon, and Byblos were the most prominent. Each city-state had its own ruler and conducted its own affairs, though later on, they'd all become subjects or at least tributaries of other states and empires. Before we get into that though, I think that we should explore Phoenicia's unique geography. Let's take a look at a few maps. What was once the land of Phoenicia was located in what we today call the Near or Middle East. Its location put it within a network of important land and sea trade routes that crisscrossed Asia, Europe, and Africa. Phoenician cities such as Byblos had been trading with the Egyptians and docking at their ports since at least the 4th millennium BC. However, around the mid-16th century BC, the Egyptian pharaoh Ahmose I embarked on a sustained campaign of conquest in the eastern Mediterranean, especially in the land of Canaan. Within a century, all of the Phoenician cities were at least nominally under the control of the Egyptians. Though often subject to the whims of pirates and bands of stateless marauders, for the most part, the Phoenician cities were able to greatly prosper under the protection of the Egyptian crown. Their only real commercial rival was the wealthy city of Ugarit, much further to the north. By around 1190 BC, the eastern Mediterranean world was in chaos. Long story short, civilization and societies in many parts of the region, including the broader Near East, were breaking down and being overrun by bands of migrants and marauders, who scholars collectively call the Sea Peoples. The great Mycenaean civilization of Greece collapsed, as did the Hittite Empire that ruled most of Anatolia. Egypt had also been greatly weakened, and eventually lost its empire in the Levant, which included the land of Canaan. There was disorder and disarray all over the eastern Mediterranean, with the exception of one place, Phoenicia. Now, scholars still debate as to why this was so. The Phoenicians didn't have a large army, and at least their local fleets were equipped primarily for mercantile activities, not military. Any Phoenician warships were technically part of the pharaoh's navy, and they served with the greater Egyptian fleet. With the exception of Tyre, most of which was on an island, Phoenician cities on the coast were vulnerable to Sea People attacks on land, just like other Canaanite cities, most of which actually ended up being destroyed. These, along with other factors, have led many scholars to conclude that the Phoenicians simply paid off groups of Sea Peoples, or perhaps even hired them to protect their cities. What is apparent is that by the time the dust had settled around 1000 BC, the Phoenician cities of Tyre, Sidon, and Byblos had not only survived, but were also expanding. Not into any lands to the north, south, or the east, but westward, across the sea. At the time, the peoples of Greece were still recovering from the events of the Late Bronze Age collapse. Most of their great cities had either significantly decreased in size or had been abandoned altogether. Though the coastal areas of the Greek peninsula rebounded much quicker than those of the interior, most cities still didn't have the resources to launch large seafaring campaigns around the Mediterranean. The same, to an extent, was also true of Egypt. Though being weakened militarily in the 11th and 10th centuries BC, Egypt had many problems domestically that needed attention. Plus, politically, the pharaoh's authority was being challenged by other factions in different parts of the country. And so, putting together a large fleet mainly for the purposes of exploration and expansion, wasn't a priority, nor perhaps was it even possible. In addition, Phoenicia's commercial rival of Ugarit had been completely destroyed during the Late Bronze Age collapse. That city never recovered and was completely abandoned. All of this put the Phoenicians in a very good place. Though peoples such as the Egyptians and Greeks themselves had greatly reduced trading in various exotic goods, that didn't mean they didn't want them. The Phoenicians, with their large and expanding fleet, helped in part by nearby supplies of timber, were able to act as middlemen when it came to transporting goods from the Near East to locations in Egypt, Cyprus, and the ports of southern Anatolia. By 900 BC, they were trading with people on the Greek mainland. Eventually, the Phoenicians set up trading posts in areas well beyond these regions, basically traversing across the entire Mediterranean to reach the coasts of modern-day Spain and Portugal. There's also some evidence that has led scholars to believe that the Phoenicians may have even reached the shores of Britain. They were after tin, silver, and other valuable metals, for which they mostly traded textiles, dye, spices, intricate metalwork, ivory, and glass. The Phoenicians acted as middlemen and connected goods from Assyria, Babylonia, and caravan networks from as far as Central Asia, with ports in Egypt, North Africa, southern France, and the Iberian Peninsula. Though most of these trading posts were eventually abandoned, several of them evolved into full colonies and even independent states, the most famous of which was Kart-Hadasht, better known to us as Carthage, the ruins of which can still be seen today in Tunisia. So, I hope that you had some fun learning a little bit more about the ancient Mediterranean. There's a lot more to come, so make sure that you're subscribed. As always, thanks so much for stopping by. I'd also really like to thank GrandKek69, Jaap de Graaf, Pasta Frola, Michael Lewis, Danielle Allen, Danny Van Eck, WineXTV, Robert Morgan, Frank, Tim Lane, Candice Whipple, Faridun Dadachanji, Sher Kam, Farhad Kama, and to all of the channel's patrons on Patreon for helping to support this and all future content. Check out the benefits to being a Patreon member, and if you'd like to join, feel free to click the link in the video description. You can also follow History with Sai on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, as well as listen to special audio programs on the History with Sai podcast. Thanks again, and stay safe.